cases being reported today, and a total count of 3,613. Sadly, the number of people who have died directly related to COVID-19, that number now is 56. So we're adding four new cases today to the number of people who have passed away. The 4 new deaths include a white man in his 60s with underlying health conditions who passed away on March 31st. And as you will see, we kind of go, as these cases come in and they connecting them to COVID-19, then we report them when we get the information. So this is a white man in his 60s with underlying health conditions who passed away on March 31st. A black man in his 60s with underlying health conditions who passed away on April the 7th. A Hispanic female in her 80s with underlying health conditions who passed away on April the 8th. And a Hispanic female in her 80s with no record of any underlying health conditions who passed away on April 25th. As we prepare for reopening businesses in stages in Houston and across the state, based on the governor's executive order, I will continue to stress the importance of testing. I will say to you that we have modified the city's stay home, work safe order to incorporate the governor's executive order and adding a few other things, one of which all city permitted and sponsored events will continue to be rescheduled or canceled through the end of May. The Houston Public Library System will continue to be closed through May. And the way city employees are operating today, many of whom are working remotely, that status will continue through the month of May as well. Again, it's the testing that will give us a better sense of the extent of the community spread that exists within our city. I also want to make note of respect to the testing sites, the Butler Stadium, Del Mar Stadium, Barnett Stadium, which is in East End, and then the mobile sites at Sunnyside and Kashmere. All of those testing sites are open and running, and they are available to anyone, whether you're symptomatic or asymptomatic, who want to be tested, and I want to encourage people to fully take advantage of those testing sites. We want people to be safe and responsible as they transition back into business mode. I do not want people to think that they should immediately stop social distancing or stop wearing face coverings or stop staying at home if they have that option. Please bear in mind the virus is still in our city, still prevalent, and the testing will give us a better sense of to what degree it's in our city. The numbers are relatively low compared to other major cities like New York City, LA, Chicago. Those are the cities that are bigger than we are. But at the same time, like many others, we took steps very to shut down, and I think the numbers reflect those collective actions which indicate that they have been working. You could say that the virus has spread like a fire, and the curve is flattening. I think that is clear. The curve is flattening, but we are still reporting these new cases. And like a fire, you can extinguish the flames, but often it continues to smother. And so, smother. Did I say that word right? Smother. I wanted to see if you all got it. Thank you. But the reality is, if you start coming back together, not engaging in social distancing, not wearing the face coverings, then it's almost like adding fuel to the fire. And so you may think it's out, but quite frankly, it's not out. And it will come back, and it can come back with a vengeance and be reignited. So please, as we start tomorrow, May 1st, for those businesses that will be opening up in stages, please be very, very careful. I certainly understand people are worried about their jobs and families, and we are as well. As restaurants, malls, and retail stores start to reopen, please adhere to the 25% occupancy limits. And quite frankly, it's going to be on a trust you basis and self-policing. because we simply don't have the resources to be going all around the city of Houston to be checking to see whether or not you're following the 25% occupancy. So please adhere to the rule. I'm also advising people to be cautious before rushing back to work or eat out or stopping at restaurants, retailers, and other major businesses to begin open. Please proceed very cautiously. As for City of Houston government operations, as I indicated earlier, we will remain in our COVID-19 response through the end of May and will resume a normal schedule on June the 1st. Through the month of May, there will be no city-sponsored or permitted events. The libraries, again, will remain closed. In addition to municipal court, will also remain closed. Now, at this point in time, let me stop and bring up Dr. Peirce.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. One is the mayor pointed out with the deaths that there is often a lag. And so I want to explain that a little bit. So by law, hospitals have about 10 days to report, they have 10 days to report a death to the local health department. Very often when a patient dies, the test result or the diagnosis of COVID-19 has not yet occurred. And so what we're doing at the health department is as we get the death reports in and as we get the test results in, we're trying to contact the people who test positive in order to do our contact tracing efforts. Simultaneously, we have developed another system where we are matching test results to death certificates. And that's where some of these late delays are coming. We're finally being able to match a test result with a death certificate that's obviously generally a person who we've been trying to get in contact with and we haven't. Sometimes when the test results come, there's very little information with that. There's a name and a phone number. We wish that there was more, but the labs and such are getting much better at it. But that's part of the reason why there are sometimes these big gaps between when somebody passes away and we identify that they are a COVID-related death. So I just want to explain that a little bit. In terms of the reopening and the governor's order with a 25% of occupancy for stores, I want to remind folks, the store owners, I said a couple days ago, I said we need to be smart about this. So for example, let me just paint the picture of a restaurant. That doesn't mean that you close off 75% of the floor space and operate 25% of your restaurant. The whole point of this is to have social distancing built into the business model. And so I've already had a couple of conversations with folks who had suggested they were going to close off certain parts of the restaurant and advise them that's not going to achieve the goal. And the long-term effect would be that if we wind up with spread, then it would just set us a step back. So once they started to think of it that way, they understood. So to all retailers, all business owners, when you reopen the stores, the 25% is to encourage the social distancing as a function of how your business is going to work. So that goes for retail as well as restaurants, so on and so forth. And then the other thing, as businesses reopen, a lot of them, the water has been stagnant in the pipes because it hasn't been flowing water. And so the chlorine in that water will dissipate a little bit over time, and so we want you to flush those pipes. So our Public Works system is advising that you flush the water from all the faucets at least for several minutes, and that you should then, if you're making ice, you want to run that ice machine, discard the ice several times in order to ensure that the entire system is flushed. At the end, the water should be clear, it should be odorless, and it should taste like normal water. And if there's any problems with that, please call 311. We want to make sure that everyone is safe and as we move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I also want to indicate in the numbers that we've given you, the 3613, about 132 of those cases are from the county jail. And so what we're going to do as we move forward is that we're going to deaggregate that information. The numbers from the county jail will be in a separate category. And just like we are now with the fire department going into many of the nursing homes and others are testing there, we're going to deaggregate those numbers as well. So in that 3613, 132 of them are coming from the Harris County Jail. So just for clarity, I wanted to lay that out. There are a lot of moving parts to all of this, and I've asked Marvin Odom to pull together all of those moving parts as we proceed to go forward. So he's leading the recovery effort. So let me call on Marvin Odom.
All right, thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of the recovery, I'm going to start with something you've already heard from the Mayor and you heard a bit from Dr. Peirce, and that is that individual behavior is the key to a successful reopening. So particularly as we go through the next weeks and maybe even the next months, that individual behavior around distancing, around, keeping the right protective equipment with you and using that. If you look at the governor's plan, it's all predicated on that continuing. So that's number one. That's what we all need to keep in mind, and I don't think we can say it enough. Just a couple of words about the role, continuing on what we talked about a little over a week ago now. This role is largely about coordination, so we've been very actively working with the business community, very much with the medical community, with civic leaders around and nonprofits and you name it. We're all working this together to try to make sure when we put plans forward, it's that holistic picture that represents our whole community. Top of that list is making sure we're very well coordinated with the county. So Armando Wally and myself have stay in basically daily contact to make sure that we're meeting that goal. So a couple of things that I wanted to share as we start to reopen here, with the main goal, of course, being to keep everybody safe. What I wanted to do is just focus on the top 3 or so priorities where we're really focusing a lot of our attention to make sure that we do this right. And number 1 is testing. So we have, through supply chain issues and a number of others, you've seen that testing capacity ramp up in Houston and in Harris County over the last weeks and months now. That supply chain capacity is starting to loosen up. We're moving forward with a different strategy now on testing in the city. And basically, the situation now allows us to look at this entire geography, think about all the risks that are out there, starting with our vulnerable and at-risk communities, thinking about that from a socioeconomic standpoint, where we've seen outbreaks in the past. Just about every data point you can imagine to cut and understand where the priorities are, we'll do that. And we'll develop now a number of different sites around the city to make testing available, to make it easy for people in those communities to get tested. And that plan will start to roll out next week. So you'll see more of this in the next week or so. And then we will systematically, in some degree of priority order, build those sites out across the city. Now, the needs are diverse, so you can expect that to come in fixed sites like you've seen so far, like the mayor has started in terms of mobile activity. I suspect we'll see a fair amount of that come in mobile capacity. But that's critical, and that's one of the main tools that we'll have to understand how we're doing through this recovery and make sure it's going the way it should. Now, testing alone is not enough. So, as you've already heard, the piece that has to be matched with testing is contact tracing, or contact tracking, however you choose to say it. Now, that's a capability that, if you read the governor's report, there's going to be a statewide effort. We're now working with the state. As a matter of fact, I have a call first thing in the morning with the state to understand exactly what's happening there so that we can determine immediately how we fit into that plan and how much activity we need to initiate in the city on our own right now. And I think it's going to be a combination of those two things. Us jumping out, starting to build the capacity to do that and the capabilities of doing that, coordinating very closely with the county to make sure we're aligned on how we're doing all that, but with the vision to ultimately connect to this system that will exist statewide on contact tracing. The reason, I think it's obvious, but I want everybody to keep in mind, the reason you need the two of these together is testing obviously identifies as you start to see additional contaminations out there or infections out there. Contact tracing allows you then to contain that to a small area so you don't get that wide community spread. So that's what we're after. The third thing I would identify that continues to be important and is really quite mature at this stage are the measures that we need to follow, both the leading and the lagging measures, to make sure, again, that this whole system is working, and if we need to make any adjustments, we're prepared to do that as early as possible. So you can think about the, all the things that you're used to seeing now, the number of new cases a day, all the way through to the number of deaths. But I think the things that, as I think about a reopening strategy, the measures we're going to want to keep very close to us and understand very well is that hospital capacity, that ICU capacity, that critical equipment. It's looking at the supplies. Do we have 30, 60 days, plenty of supplies in terms of PPE and so forth. So those measures will be on the mayor's desk every morning, and we'll be tracking that to make sure we're staying in what I'd call the safe zone as we move through the reopening process. The final thing I'll mention today, let me just say this. I could stand up here and talk about 15 different initiatives that are happening, and I mention that just out of respect for the people that are working very hard on all those plans. but I'm just going to mention one more today. And that is, as businesses are thinking about returning to work, the city, the county has been working with the Greater Houston Partnership and chambers across the city to produce some guidelines that help give that guidance to businesses as to what they need to consider as they come back. Now, that work is also quite mature. It's been active for a couple of weeks now, and you can actually find this with all those contributions on the GHP website. And actually, what you're looking for is under the title of Reopen Houston Safely. So we've looked at this. We very much like what we see under it. I've looked at some plans of individual companies that follow these guidelines and what they've produced. They're absolutely terrific. And for anybody looking for a resource on the business side, thinking about the implications of going back, this is a great resource. It's broken down into 15 workplace principles, which you'll see now. Starting tomorrow, you'll actually be able to see by segment. Think about restaurant owners, or think about a major business like an oil and gas business going to work. You'll see those standards, best practices, and so forth laid out in that format that, again, I think will provide a very good tool. So lots more happening, and we'll update you as we go. Mayor, I'll stop there.
Chief Pena.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm happy to report that we have no major changes in the number of firefighters that have been exposed. We have, matter of fact, we're trending downward. Today we have 55 firefighters that are in quarantine. We've had a total of 41 firefighters that have been exposed and tested positive to COVID-19. 26 of those have since returned back to work. The rest are recovering at home. In regards to the occupancy task force, the number of complaints have been dropping. Yesterday we responded to 37 complaints, 0 citations. We're going to maintain the same profile as beginning tomorrow as the economy starts to open back up and we have businesses opening back up for business. We're going to be working basically off of a complaint basis. As the mayor mentioned earlier, we don't have the capacity or the resources to go out there and patrol. So the goal is, again, to provide the information, provide the education, and ensure that we're looking after public safety and achieving voluntary compliance. We don't expect any major issues. Our inspectors and our arson investigators have been doing an outstanding job of ensuring that we provide the right information and gain voluntary compliance. In regards to our operational profile, as these businesses start going up, we do anticipate the number of exposures may go up. The fire department will remain in the same operational profile as we've been operating under in these last couple of weeks. Personal protective equipment will be issued. They will be required to wear that personal protective equipment. The same approach as the heightened level of suspicion for all our patients will continue. And the goal, again, is to ensure that that our firefighters remain safe, to ensure that we are providing adequate staffing to be able to serve this community. That's my report. Thank you.
Chief Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to start off with an update on Detective Ray Cervantes. He remains in the hospital. He's still on a ventilator, and he's still not out of the woods, but we remain hopeful. The family, again, continues to ask for prayers and wants to thank everybody, the community, for their prayers and continued support. As of today, we are down to 51 members of the department that are in quarantine, 28 classified, 23 support personnel. We remain at 42 positives that, in terms of the exposure, which are 40 classified, sworn, and 2 support. And 31 of the folks that out of the 42 have returned to work, which is great news. In terms of our operational profile, our calls for service were up yesterday by 10%, so we're starting to trend up again. This is very consistent with what we're seeing around the country. From New York to Los Angeles, calls for service and law enforcement in terms of crime is starting to go up. In terms of our homicides, that we're about 4% since the COVID orders were issued and the shutdown or the stay-at-home orders. Our aggravated assaults are up 8% today, which includes our domestic violence being up 2%. The property crime issue that we have in terms of burglary buildings. We're still at about 22% increase, but we're working very closely with the business sector to talk about how to harden sites and some of the strategies we can use collaboratively to actually reduce those. And as the businesses open, we anticipate those that go down significantly. And that's my report for this afternoon, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. And finally, Chief Bunick with the Office of Emergency Management.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership during this crisis and for adding additional testing sites in the community where it's mostly needed. I'm happy to report some good news. SETRAC, Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council, allocated the City of Houston 9 pallets of PPE this week, and we expect to get some allocations every week for the next few weeks. These allocations are coming from the state's strategic national stockpile. I'd like to thank Jerry Adams from Finance and Christopher Perkins from the Office of Emergency Management and Jamie Arredondo from HFD for obtaining these PPEs, these large shipments, storing them, and then distributing them out to the essential employees that need them. Logistics is a full-time job, and all these men and women are working extremely hard to get the equipment out to those who need it. Thank you, Mayor.
And let me just say that as May 1 approaches tomorrow, the wearing of these face coverings will be even more important starting tomorrow as people start to come together a little bit more. But the social distancing is still very much required. The city has distributed already through various channels, city council members and faith-based organizations, about 120,000 face coverings and masks in the past week, really since this weekend. And we'll be distributing, thousands of more over the next several days and this coming weekend. So let me encourage you to reach out to your council members for face coverings or when there will be mass distribution efforts. And I know Councilmember Kamen in District C will be having a mass distribution efforts over the weekend, along with Councilmember Cisneros in District H at the White Oak Music Hall mass distribution. Will be taking place there, along with many other council members as well. And I would suspect between now and Monday, we'll probably be distributing anywhere between another 50 to 70,000 masks. So it's very important because as we move forward, everyone is going to be assuming a little bit more risk as people come together. But let me just say, we're going to do everything that we can within our power to keep everyone safe, make this reopening, work. And it's going to require all of us to be responsible and do their part as well. Having said that, mask up, and I'll pause and take whatever questions you may have. Watch your step, watch your step. No.
Got an ambulance, okay. Tell me about the rental assistance program you're planning to announce next week and what that would do in terms of any people getting eviction notices.
Yeah, we're working now to try to finalize that. The Texas Supreme Court has halted evictions until May the 18th. We know that there are many, many people in the city of Houston that are hurting, been laid off, lost their jobs, lost income. And so they're in a difficult bind in terms of paying their rent and on their mortgage. I do want to acknowledge apartment owners who have stepped up, who are working with their tenants, and we've announced several who are not evicting anyone. In fact, that they are providing cash payments, assistance to their own tenants. But in addition to that, we're looking at putting forth a rental assistance program. It will be before city council members this coming Wednesday. It's not going to meet the needs of everyone, but it will help. It will help thousands. So those details will be laid out on Wednesday.
And generally, would it help block evictions? Because you still hear anecdotal stories about people saying they've been given notice.
Well, even depending on where those people live, the Texas Supreme Court has halted all evictions until May 18th. What this will do is we'll provide some assistance taking into account a couple of months, April and May. It will be limited in terms of the cash amount, okay? So we're not saying we're going to cover everybody's monthly rent, but it will provide significant assistance for 2 months, capped at a certain amount. And then we'll probably work through another entity. It won't just be coming directly from the city, but we'll look at advancing dollars to another nonprofit who would then be responsible for carrying out the program.
And so we move from that to another issue. Apparently, there is a, quote, adult entertainment club that says it will open after the stroke of midnight this evening, 25% capacity and social distancing within the establishment. What kind of concerns do you think that might present to people?
Restaurants, malls, retail, movie theaters. I don't think that falls in the category.
Sexually oriented businesses and entertainment venues would not fall under the allowed reopening.
And if they're not falling within those categories, then I would think they're not opening in the city of Houston.
And as I depart, one last question. What advice?
And let me just be very clear. If you don't fall into those categories authorized through the governor's order, then I fully anticipate, I expect for you not to open. Okay? And so if you're not in those categories, then you are not allowed to open. And then the fire marshals as well as HPD have the authority to make sure you do not open.
And you had brought this view up on CNN. I heard your interview yesterday, and it's just because places reopen, people may not come.
That is true.
And so what would you suggest to be as kind of the guidelines for people who go or thinking about going into the place? What are some of the red flags they should look for?
Well, let me just say to you from my vantage point, this virus is still in the city of Houston. It still exists. It has not gone away. And so it is still important for people to engage in social distancing and to wear the face coverings. Just because something is open doesn't necessarily mean you need to walk in there, okay? Just because, a business may open and they have the right to open, operating at 25% occupancy, doesn't mean that you have to be the one sitting in the seat. So you have to exercise some judgment. I will be exercising some judgment. My family will be exercising some judgment, and I think other people will as well. So it is important, I think, and wise for people to be cautious as we move forward. The flame may not be there as a part of this fire, but it doesn't mean that the fire is totally out. And so if you start congregating, coming together as if the virus never existed, then you're going to see this fire reignite, and then it's going to really resurface. Our job, and what we're all trying to do collectively, is to keep these numbers as low as possible. And people in our city have done extremely well, and I want to thank them for that. But at the same time, we all need to proceed with a great deal of caution. In some sense, you can say until there's more robust testing, we're all proceeding somewhat blindly. I can't tell you where the virus is unless we go and test every single person, and then that test only lasts as long as, it's for today. Doesn't necessarily apply tomorrow. So because we can't quite see where the virus is without much more widespread, robust, ubiquitous testing, then we all need to proceed very cautiously. And that's why we are hoping that all the businesses who have been authorized to reopen will do so with the 25% occupancy and will self-police themselves and will take the necessary steps, as Marvin indicated, to make sure you're practicing and working as safely as possible. So we're all very much in it together. The worst thing would be for people just to swarm places or not to engage in safe practices, and 3 to 4 weeks down the road, the numbers start to spike. So it's not based on what happens tomorrow or next week, because it takes about 14 days for this virus to take hold. It will be important to see what the numbers are in terms of the people going to our hospitals, in terms of what's being reported 3 to 4 weeks from now. That'll give us a much better sense of whether or not our collective efforts are working and moving, and we're moving in the right direction, or whether or not we need to check this system and put in place some additional precautions. And nobody wants to open up to be shut down again. And that's why I'm asking people, don't rush. This is one of those times where everyone has to be very patient and very careful as we proceed.
Mayor, with
Yes, come on. Hold on one second, Marcus.
Just add one comment to that. This is a little bit of an optimistic view, but the business and the customers, let's say, are aligned here, right? A business is only going to be successful if customers can have the confidence that they can go there safely. I'll tell you what I look for. I imagine in a room, in a restaurant, in a business, that there's somebody there that's asymptomatic, but they have the virus. Does this situation allow me to stay protected in that environment? That's what I look for personally.
In other words, take your own precautions as
Yeah,
well.
and I go back to individual behavior here is so important in making this a success.
Mayor, with respect to the testing and the numbers, and maybe this is a question for Dr. Peirce, the numbers continue to fluctuate. Yes, the curve has flattened. Can you speak to the backlog, or what type of backlog we're looking at in terms of getting these test results in from the labs that are doing the testing?
Well, I'm happy to report that the backlog is better than it was. For a while there, we were looking at 10 to 14 days. And with some of the labs, we're actually hearing within 24 to 48 hours, which is the way it should be. There are still others that are 5, 7, 8 days, which is a little bit frustrating. But they understand that this is a problem for us, and they're working internally to do it. And it tends to be, unfortunately, with the labs are doing the larger numbers. And so in particular, it's LabCorp and Quest Labs. And they're working with us, but it has improved. But it has time to go. And yes, you are seeing some of those fluctuations, but we're not seeing the fluctuations like we saw a couple of weeks ago when we had one day we had 600 cases. So we are seeing some fluctuations. So it has improved. It has a way to go yet. Everybody's aware of it, and they're working on it.
So with restrictions easing up starting tomorrow as the economy continues to reopen in phases, how is that going to impact when we truly reach our peak here?
So that's a really good question. And as the mayor pointed out, and as we've said here before, is that in public health, we have found that when you make an intervention from a public health standpoint, it's about 2 weeks until you see the numbers change with whatever your intervention is. Now this virus, let's face it, this virus has broken pretty much every rule of viruses along the way here. So we'll see. We're about to find out. The other kicker to this question is not only going to be the lag in the testing and what will that play into this, as we're looking at basically an 18-day window that the mayor gave us from May 1st to May 18th. But in addition, I'm sort of projecting that in the beginning, the number of people that will be going to a restaurant this weekend will probably not be the same number of people who are going to a restaurant next weekend. I'm sort of anticipating that the public is going to change in its behavior a little bit as they become more or less comfortable going out. And so that may impact it as well. And we're just going to have to wait and see. We're going to try to track the numbers as closely as we can. And if anybody who works in a lab who's out there listening, everything that you can do to get us the results more quickly is really important right now, and we really appreciate your efforts in doing that.
Dr. Peirce, I'm sorry to bring you back here. The Houston Health Department is working with Rice University, I understand, to test wastewater samples for COVID-19. Can you just talk about, what the potential benefits of that project are, if you see that as a way to potentially make up for the lack of testing capacity here?
To make up for lack of what?
Testing capacity.
Okay. So there are two different things. So for everyone to know that we are working with Rice University, and it's our environmental health division within the health department, is testing wastewater. And so one of the things that we know is that this virus is shed in the stool. And so we're actually able to test the wastewater for the presence of virus. And there are actually ways where you can mathematically, from the station where you're getting the wastewater, and you know where that water comes from, the size of the neighborhoods, the number of households, you can make an estimate as to what percent of the population in that neighborhood or neighborhoods may have people who are infected. And so we're starting with this. We've got some early data. We're trying to refine it. It's not quite ready to be released yet, but we're trying to refine that. And one of the issues that we've got is that at this point, the geographic area that drains into where we're testing from remain pretty large. And so we're moving forward with that. But that may help us once we refine that. Once we move forward, we may be able to identify geographic areas where we may need to, where there may not be as much testing going on, but if we're finding a lot of virus in the wastewater, we'll know. Now, if there's a neighborhood where there's a lot of testing going on and it gives us a value of whatever percent that we think people are infected, the wastewater value should match that. So that's one of the things we're doing, because quite honestly, nobody's ever done this before. We've never really tracked an illness across a huge community like the fourth largest city in the nation, using not only testing of individuals, but at the same time testing the wastewater. So we're trying some new techniques, and we need to refine those before we can really hang our hat on what the results show.
And then Mayor and possibly Chief Pena, we've talked a little bit about kind of voluntary compliance with the orders tomorrow.
Yes.
Can you talk about whether or not the city ever issued a citation for violations of the restaurant and bar closures or the stay-home order? And, what will be done about those businesses?
And I certainly want to acknowledge Councilmember Sally Alcorn, who was here as well. Chief?
Yes, sir.
And what will be done about the businesses that break the rules?
That break the rules? So let me first answer your first question. We've had over 3,000 complaints that we responded to since the stay-home order began. We've issued 9 citations in that time period. So almost 100% of the time we've achieved voluntary compliance. Even very few notices of violation were issued. And so as we move to the next phase, when they start opening up, we're going to be deploying the same way as we're deploying now, based on complaints. And the inspectors on scene are going to have the latitude to ensure that they gain compliance with the 25% rule. We're going to be basing that on the established occupancy load for that business. The Life Safety Code requires the occupancy load to be posted in these assemblies, but it is going to be difficult to enforce. Okay, and voluntary compliance is what we're looking after. The inspectors, again, on scene will make that determination, and as Mr. Odom mentioned, it's going to be about providing for a safe space for people to visit. And yes, personal responsibility is going to be huge. If you walk in and it doesn't seem safe or that they're able to maintain the appropriate distancing, again, you're going to have to make that determination on a personal basis. And but look, wearing of the face mask is going to be critically important. The virus is still present. It's still highly contagious. And what we don't want is to see another spike that's going to force us to take different steps.
Were those 9 citations, were those the bar and restaurant closures or the stay-home order or a combination? No,
we strictly enforced the occupancy aspect of the stay-home order. So okay. Those were all bars and restaurants and those types. Yes, sir.
And also, I want to acknowledge Councilmember Pollard, who's here as well. Okay.
As for timing, are you comfortable with this reopening of the businesses happening now, and are you personally going to be shopping at the mall this weekend or eating at a restaurant?
I will not be at the mall. I will not be at the restaurant. I'm going to be at my home, watching television, watching all of you. I take turns watching each one of your stations. I give you equal time. So, look, again, the restaurants, the retails, the malls are open, and with the 25% occupancy, and people will have to exercise their judgment. My job is simply to say to you, be very careful and be very cautious. We're going to do everything we can within our power to make all of this work. And I think that's important. We're going to do everything we can. And that's why over the next several days this weekend, council members and others will be distributing masks again. And so if you're going to the malls, if you're going to retail, please mask up. Please do that. Please engage in social distancing. All of those things are critically important because collectively, I think we've done well. Now, let me strongly say to individuals who are older, in their 60s and 70s and 80s, people with underlying health conditions, they need to be even extra careful. Of the 56 people who have died in the city of Houston due to COVID-19, approximately 52 of them have died with underlying medical conditions. And so if you're suffering with hypertension, lung disease, diabetes, on dialysis, sickle cell, you need to be extra careful regardless of where you go, whether you go to a restaurant or even whether you're staying at home and people are coming in and out of your house. Okay, so, I'm going to proceed cautiously as we move forward.
Nearby communities and counties have different rules. The beaches in Galveston will be open this weekend. Are you worried about how those could impact us here in Houston?
Yes, I am, because our geographical boundaries are very porous, and people are driving up and down all of our freeways. They're coming in and going out. And so you can contract something outside of the city of Houston and bring it to the city of Houston. So all of those are concerns. We're all in this together, I guess is the point that I want to make. We're all in this together, and we all need to be exercise responsible, safe behavior, regardless of where we live, especially when we're in the region.
Major League Baseball is talking about coming and starting back up. Are you aware of any discussion with MLB and the city of Houston?
Not at this time. Marvin, I don't know if you've had any conversation with MLB? Not at this time. I look forward to seeing them again. I can't, to be honest with you, I can't wait. To be honest with you, I can't wait to visit many of my favorite restaurants and stuff. But patience is a virtue.
Megan Thee Stallion and Beyonce have teamed up for a remix benefiting
I
Bread
know,
of
they're
Life.
my very good friends.
Talk to us about this collaboration and how this makes you feel as mayor that this is happening.
I feel, and look, we are some outstanding folk with strong roots to the city of Houston. And those two have really teamed up. They've really helped out the city of Houston. I look forward to acknowledging them in a very special way as we move forward. But Houstonians at all levels, sports, entertainment, you name it, they have just really been incredible. Trader Truth, others, been incredible. So let me thank them, and we'll continue to need their support as we move forward. I'll call them later on tonight and talk to them. Even with a mask on, I couldn't say that with a straight face, But again, let me thank you all.
My question to Mr. Marvin Odum. As the coordinator, we have been hearing constantly about minorities, social and economic disparity issues, which are resident within these minority communities, which have led to these comorbidities, which are driving these high deaths, that we have in the data. And you are a coordinator for the recovery program, as you say, but there is also that request and the need for advocacy for these issues to be addressed. How much are you doing? How much are you going to fight for these communities? How much are you going to fight for these people? And what plan do you have in place?
Well, I can tell you with confidence that the advocacy is coming through loud and clear. And as I talk about things like what are the most important things to do now that we're starting to reopen, it is that monitoring plan. And as I talk about expanded testing and that type of thing, it's about, going and identifying first where are those communities that are most at risk, just as you described. That's where those testing facilities will go first, and then we'll expand to the rest of the city from there. So it's built in directly to everything that we're doing. In addition to that, the mayor started a task force. The Health Equity Response is the name of that task force. That group that I'm working with very closely has this entire basket of what do we need to do for those that are vulnerable to this situation, at risk because of this situation. And that's broadly, not just testing, but that comes into food supply all the way through a raft of other issues. So feel confident that that advocacy is here and that this program is designed consistent with that.
Again, so let me thank everyone. Let me just say, whether you go to a restaurant or not, even if you don't, you can go and get your food and bring the restaurant to your table. And I certainly will be ordering from restaurants. Even if I don't go, I'm going to order, okay? And so that's important. Even if you don't go to a retail store, it doesn't stop you from shopping online. So we still can be very supportive of our businesses and put them in a position so that they don't have to close their doors or shut down. So there are many, many ways that we can help. And so even if you don't go to a restaurant, please order from a restaurant. And you can do that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the same thing with the shopping. Please do that. Even if you don't personally go to a retail, you can still go and be very supportive of our businesses. And they are deserving of that, and I certainly want to thank them because we've all made some tremendous sacrifices. Thank you all so very much, and we'll talk soon.